Welcome to the promised panel. And we made the little war between the rooms, so that it's a little bit more cozy and a more nicer atmosphere to discuss. Because the basic idea of this panel is not only to let those smart people speak, but also to let many of the smart people here in the room speak as well. So we prepared some topics we were by ourselves curious to talk about, but we really want to invite all of you to contribute to the conversation, because again, this entire ML field is pretty fresh, it's pretty new, and lots of you and lots of us are looking for kind of orientation. What does it mean, and how should I start, and what does it mean for my business, and all those questions, yeah. So, and it can also serve kind of as this kind of a wrap-up of the conference. So, yeah, please feel invited just to raise your hand. And I think we got some support with a microphone, but the hall is not so big, yeah. Okay, so this gentleman will bring the microphone in case you want to raise a question. And then we have 30 minutes to discuss some interesting topics. Before we start, please, first of all, introduce yourself. Hannah, first of all, you. Take the microphone.
Is it working? Everybody can hear me? Yeah, my name is Hanna Kujawska. I'm a maintenance manager in an oil and gas company. And currently, I'm exploring my expertise in the machine learning and artificial intelligence field. And currently, I'm developing my professional skills at the University of Bergen in Norway.
Thank you. I'm Chris Hitzber. I have a background in mathematics and computer algebra. I did some research on data mining. And currently my special field of interest is reinforcement learning, and I currently apply reinforcement learning to hydraulic simulations.
Hello, I'm Christoph Henkelmann from Divisio in Cologne. I'm CTO and co-founder, and we build AI and ML systems at our company.
Hi, I'm Peter Buteneers. So I did a PhD in machine learning a while ago, but currently I'm the CTO at chtlayer.
Cool. Thank you so much. So, first of all, we were thinking a little bit about, again, the world is eager and hot on machine learning. This is hot, this is interesting. You can really make nice marketing. Yeah, I'm a company having an ML-based solution. But at the end, if we look to many projects, one could see that there are kind of fake ML projects, yeah. So maybe there's a solution where one says, okay, there's lots of algorithm and interesting self-adapting, self-learning stuff in it, but maybe there's a solution which could also have been made by a traditional database. So do you believe it makes sense to speak about fake ML projects, or is this too strong, too evil? Who would like to ask? Yeah.
Well, there is a tendency, because everybody wants to say they do AI. I think ML, the term, is not so much the problem, but AI, that everybody wants to say we do AI. Mm-hmm. And there is a tendency for that to happen, because hardly anybody can afford these days to say, well, we don't know anything about the topic. So I think there is a lot of emperor's new clothes type of projects out there. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, personally, I don't mind that much that they call it AI or whatever. The most important thing I think there is that you solve the problem at hand. And whether you call it AI or even blockchain, I don't care. I mean, whatever you do, if you solve the problem, it's okay. If you come to this conference and you start talking about what you did, well, it's a different story, I guess. But
yeah. But does anybody see, let's say, a class of solutions or a class of problems, or maybe a specific example for that, where you really say, this is a very specific ML moment. That's something where it really makes sense not to use it as a substitute for something else, but this cannot be solved otherwise. Do you see something like that?
Yeah, I think the very important thing is actually to understand what AI is capable to do and what is not feasible. So I would like to point out one more important thing, that if you look for a great AI consumer tech companies, they are really concentrating on one thing, the acquisition of a strategic data. And this is actually, in my opinion, the key point to be or to become AI company. And we should understand that those strategic data builds everything on top of it. And the second characteristic thing for AI companies, I also would like to point out, is that those companies are very good in very quickly saying, okay, this is the place where actually automation can replace repetitive stuff. So they can say, okay, here it's possible to introduce supervised learning. And like this, they create a product which are composed on very simple tasks, but machine learning is introduced over there, and they see very easily what is feasible and what is not feasible. So I think this is the main characteristic of good AI companies and good AI projects. First of all, that it's based on acquisition of strategic data. And second thing, they are very quick in spotting out the opportunities of automation and replacing this with the AI projects.
So what exactly, so this sounds like, in one hand it sounds like something very simple. You need some data to do something more with it, yeah? So is it as trivial, or what does it mean to have strategic data, as you said?
I would say there's a kind of a well-known roadmap which is helping any company to become a great AI company. And maybe I will repeat those steps for the people who doesn't know that, from the basic business review strategies and after Andrew Ng. There is a first step for every company that looks for good AI projects. So the first one is to execute a pilot project as fast as possible to get the momentum. And this step is actually crucial, because in this step you will understand if that's what you want to do is actually feasible or it's not feasible. Is it actually AI or is it not AI? And once you are done with this, you can go for the second step. The second step will be to build your own house AI team. And then when you have it, then you come to the third step. The third step is actually to provide quite broad AI training. But the important thing, not only for the engineers, but also for your managers, division leaders, and also executives. And since you are done with those three steps, then you are ready to develop your AI business strategy. Not before. So it means that you can't come up and say, okay, right now I would like to become an AI company. But first try these three steps and then develop AI business strategy. And as a wrapping up point, so the last step will be just to align your internal and external strategy. So all your stakeholders and employees and investors and customers are aligned on how you navigate to arise AI. So this is actually the roadmap helping actually any company to become a good AI company.
Okay.
Yeah.
So do you all agree with this? This is, let's say, very abstract, let's say, AI maturity model, something like that. So this was it. Do you agree with that? Because
yeah, I have a small question, actually, because what I noticed with many companies is, and especially with IoT, so it's super interesting that we're doing this conference together with the IoT guys, is that a lot of companies start collecting large and large amounts of data, but they don't do anything with it. Because what you mentioned is you have to start gathering data, but where do you see the gathering data part in those three steps? I would see it somewhere in the middle, but I don't know about you.
Okay. So, of course, as many people know, acquisition of the data is not from one day to another. It's a long time process of acquisition. And the one very important point is that a lot of amount of the data doesn't guarantee anything. Actually, a big amount of the right strategic data, that is something what you're looking for. And actually maybe interesting for many people here is the question why Google is actually providing for any cost very nice tool for any machine learning or AI engineer, which is Colab. It provides free GPU, so you can run your deep learning models over there for free. And personally, I think that, look at that. Google is, in my opinion, a very good consumer tech company, and they are very good in acquisition strategic data. So they allows you for free to gain, for them, the user experience. So they watch your how long is your run session, what do you click, and so on. And they let you use this product and now monetize it in order to, when collected all the strategic data, monetize it elsewhere. So whenever we all developed and we need a real product for our needs, they will come up with perfectly suited one for us.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Just have one question to you. Maybe in case your customer is not Google, so if the customer comes around and says, hey, Christoph, I need a solution from your side. Is the customer aware about that, what Hannah calls the strategic data? So how do we come to that point?
So what Hannah just described is, of course, like a gold standard, perfect, idealized way of doing things. And from our experience, the reality is much uglier. So you were asking, when do we start collecting data? We give, maybe that's not like the proper way, but a very practical way is the first thing before we even start talking to the customers. We say, keep everything that is legal to keep. Don't think about if you need it or you don't at first, because acquisition of data takes a long time. And I always tell the customer, if you have got the storage capacity and it's legal to keep, start recording everything you have. Because while we are talking, we keep recording and nothing gets lost. And then, when while consulting, we arrive at one point where we know what data we need. As long as we keep the original raw data, you can always throw stuff away later. But once you've thrown it away, it's gone. So this is something we would do differently. We just said, don't even think about what you want to do. You don't know it yet, because what you want to do is always different at the end of the project than at the start. Mm-hmm. They start with one idea, and it's always a process, what is possible, what isn't, and you always arrive at something else. So this is why we say just start collecting the data, and later, when we know what we do, we will optimize this process. But at least we have the old data, and we can just run importers and clean it up later.
And do you never have problems with the inconsistencies within the data? Because when I used to come at bigger corporations, they had a lot of data, but most of the data was just not usable. How do you tackle that?
Hard work.
Okay.
So we try, of course, as soon as possible to get into the process and talk to the people, and we say, okay, this is tabular data. Just use CSV, for example. Use it like this. If you switch sensors, make sure you version it like this. It's so different each time, but you very quickly need to talk to the people. But even if you do that later, first thing is start recording. In the worst case, you can't use it, but then you're just as bad off as you hadn't tried. But in most cases, you just write in, maybe the data changes in between. As long as you know when it changes, you just write an additional importer. Sometimes it doesn't work, that's true, but just keep it as soon as possible. Keep everything you can.
But I guess it would also be very helpful to have a general idea of what your next AI application is going to be.
Exactly.
Because this idea kind of drives your data acquisition process and also motivates like all the other employees to support this data acquisition. Because if you don't have the other employees who support you, you're not going to do your AI project.
That's
in my experience.
100% correct.
Yeah. And you just said when you want to start, you probably never know exactly where you're going to arrive, because it's a learning process. So, but coming back again, so what's your tip, or the panelist tip, how to start? Yeah? What piece to take and to play around and maybe to produce failures or whatever. So
I agree with Hannah on that you start with a simple prototype as soon as possible, something small.
Yep.
I have to, it's always a mixed bag, because as a service provider you want to sell stuff and you need to get the project started. But you have to promise so much that the project doesn't die. If you just say, well, ML and AI is super hard and take you years and maybe it won't work, nobody wants to do a project. You have to be realistic in what you promise, but not so harsh that you crush everybody's spirit. So you start with a small project, and test various approaches. And if one of them starts to show promise, then you develop a strategy together and turn it into a real product.
Maybe a question
How
to
do you
the
find this
audience.
project?
Maybe a question to the audience. Who is in the stage of building that kind of proof of concept, those small products? Is somebody doing that already?
I
The rest is doing production systems, or please, maybe you would like to tell your experience. Some of you? No.
Who's before this stage? Who hasn't even started on the proof of concept yet? Maybe also an important question. Who's the rest of you guys? I mean, I counted like 7 or 9 hands. Like,
Maybe who would like to do an ML project but doesn't know if it can get started and has problems with the superiors and is just here to find out how to get it started. So there are things.
Yeah, that's interesting. So it's really the small pieces to look at and to find out, let's say, more or less individually what matters or what not, and what would be a candidate to try things out, right? If we speak
So I guess in general, there's a temptation also to strive for disruption, to find the huge or great project you should do. But I guess there's only a few real situations where disruption happens. So, but in most industries, you will find like a bag or a box of problems which have lived in this industry like for a very long time. And using AI or ML, you won't be able to solve all of them. But it might be quite an inspiring idea to take one of these problems or 2 out of the box, take a look at it, and maybe in a team, think about it, can we find another way to do it using AI? And if just out of these 10 problems you find in your industry box, you can address one, it will already have maybe not a disruptive, but a very strong effect on the rest of your competitors. So if you don't know what to do yet, I think that would be a nice way to start, at least for a workshop.
Is there anybody who can just mention maybe a small example for that, just concretely? I don't know. I take those, advertising numbers and do something with this. Those sales numbers, whatever, and do something with this. Is there something from your experience? Yeah? It's not even necessary to mention company.
I can't mention the company name, but we had a similar. It still exists. a big German industrial company, and they have a research and development department, and they produce things, prototypes, and the prototypes are relatively expensive, and they have to test if the prototypes are broken. And their idea was to automate this test if the things are broken. This is, by the way, was the inspiration for my autoencoder talk. And this was exactly the thing we met. And the first thing they asked, what should we store? And I said, store everything. You have a few terabytes of data, great, store it. How should we store it? Currently, we are just writing CSVs. And I said, yeah, continue doing that. Just don't delete them anymore. And then that happened. And then we talked about how the project should progress. And we did exactly the next step is that we planned a prototype. But as big companies move slow, I'm still waiting for that prototype project to start, but any day now.
Well, I come from a consumer experience background, more or less, since we do chatbots and that kind of stuff. And what we notice is that for some reason, chatbots are an easy way in. Even though you can do, like you guys, a lot more stuff. But sometimes if you just start out with a chatbot and then they see, oh, this thing works, then you can trigger your management and say, like, okay, there is something else there. We had our first project. Now let's hire those guys, for example, and go a step further and see what else we can do as projects.
Sure. Yes, please.
About your, Christoph Henkelmann, about your industrial example there. I'm just wondering, so you went into that company and you told them try a prototype?
Sorry, we told
do a proof of concept or try a prototype?
Yeah, they asked how we should. It often first starts with the first contact and then consulting. So what we do in this case, this is now more a business side, is we have a few phone calls and we try to figure out what they need to know. Where are they? At what level do we do this? We do a few talks and talk to the people. And what's really important, especially with industrial customers, you visit them and go to the shop floor. You need to see the machine. You need to see how loud it is. You need to stand in front of it and then tell you, and this is where this thing happens, that's always breaks. Because you need to understand it, you need to feel it. And then you develop a strategy together. And I think this is the important part, that you need to talk to the customer, because in IT it's always hard to figure out the real problem, but with AI and ML it's even harder because you have to understand what you're training for, otherwise all your work is for nothing.
Yeah, but before you train, you have to understand your data. I mean, I'm waiting for you to say, I looked at some statistical methods,
so what they
I noticed some correlations,
because
you don't need machine learning.
Those are details. Those are the details.
Well, are they really? I mean, I think most people don't even get there. Like, if you start with the proof of concept,
it's very simple. What they did is they took as much data as they could and put it on a hard disk. And because it was a lot of data, we actually got the hard disk in the post. And then I attached the hard disk to our machines and we did analysis. We looked at the data and then we said, we think it is a viable approach to try it out. I was always careful. I mean, you can't guarantee that something does work.
Yeah? But I guess the thing I always think about is that you should ask people in some sense, or they should ask themselves, what can I recognize even before I use machine learning?
Yeah,
what can I see out of it? Like, you can get insights out of your data. Before you go that step.
That's what we did because the engineers, they actually have a gut feeling because they say when this test of this part runs, they sometimes visit the shop floor and they say, I hear something is wrong. When you do this for years, you say, I hear something is wrong. But the thing is, if the person hears that something is wrong, and the sensors they do vibration measurement, it is very likely, if the ear can hear it, that the information is in the vibration data. So this was, for example, the approach that we took. We said, well, if you can hear it and you've got a gut feeling that when you hear it, it's wrong, then we should analyze that data. And this is how we started, and we plotted, we did heat maps, all that stuff. And then we saw that we saw some anomalies in the data, and we said, well, we see something, but we don't know if that is the error, but we will approach that one. And then from that we developed a structure, how the networks should look, and et cetera, et cetera. So this is exactly right. You talk to the people and see if the information is actually there.
And the point you raise is really valuable. Like in the workshop and the first day, which is the starter workshop for machine learning, I always try to hammer down everybody to look at your data. Try to understand your data yourself, and then you can do a lot of stuff. But quite often, a lot of companies just don't do that or don't know how to start, and that's where, well, guys can help out, of course.
I think you also had a very valuable point there. Because like what we always do is we ask the experts, the domain experts, to take a look at the data or like at the graph or whatever you have as input. And if they can tell you like in a second or two, yes, this is category A or this is the problem case and this is not problematic, then I guess then you are on a good, you're on a good way. You have a fair chance that AI might help you. Or just in a nutshell, if the expert can't help you, then AI won't either. So that's not always true. Sometimes AI does it nonetheless, but you will have a very much harder time then. So if you start an AI project, try to go to your experts. That would be my advice. Ask them if they can help you. And if they immediately see the answer, then you might buy or might start building up an AI system which supports these experts. What do you think?
Yeah, if I might just add a word. I have a feeling like maybe we should make a clearance between machine learning projects and data scientist project, because let me maybe just try to define it quickly. Like machine learning projects, firstly, will collect the data, and then on the second step, we'll train the data in an iterative process, so the model is good enough. And finally, we will deploy this model and either maintain it in an updated. Since data science project, on the first place, we collect this data, and I think what's relevant to your question, then on the second step, they actually analyze this data. They are going to make it in an iterative process, but in order to actually find the insights of this data. And finally, on the end step, they will suggest hypothesis and the action, and therefore later they deploy the model and relook on this data periodically and so on in order to keep optimizing this. But I think what is relevant is, first of all, you have to be aware what's inside of the data. That's why you need subject matter experts and co-work the subject matter experts, so the domain experts, together with the engineers that will later do the machine learning project. But data scientist project, I think in the beginning, will give you a lot of feeling what actually is possible or not, because actually the output of data science project is kind of a, I don't know, PowerPoint presentation or discussion, like what are possible paths, what are the connection, how we can improve it, what we can do, and then machine learning project comes with machine learning algorithm, and actually the real work is done over there. So,
any more questions or remarks from the audience? There's still an opportunity, but we are almost running out of time. In case you want to raise your point, feel invited. Please. 1 second, please wait for the microphone. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Regarding the data, when you look at the industry, there is a confidentiality of the data for each company. So, and we want to use as much as possible from this data. Do you think there is a medium that can be introduced, or any solution that we can share data between applications? And
so within the GDPR rule, you have two types. You have the data owner and the data processor. And if you're just a data processor, in most cases, I think you guys are also data processors, is you just get the data to process it, but you have to delete it afterwards. And the data processing laws are quite easy to work with. So if you work for a company that gathers a lot of data and is data owner, they can strike a deal with you that you can process the data, but you can obviously never own the data. So GDPR allows for that kind of stuff.
Or did your question more go into the direction of, like, I as a company have a data set, but that I would like to try to make it like an open data set and share it with other companies, and confidentially?
That would be the ultimate thing. But also, if you have a model that can be trained by many different data from different companies, can we use that from the sense of confidentiality? And at the same time, if we can define a platform for a specific standardized platform for a specific applications that we can, so the companies can agree about sharing that or something like that.
I guess the problem will there be if the data is like personalized to this to your client. If not, like if it's a general technical data, then you can view them or try to make them into anonymous data. So then, as far as I know, even under GDPR, you shouldn't have a serious problem. But if it's a personal data or it's just pseudo-anonymized, then you have to be much more careful.
And even, I mean, if you look online, you see experiments how you can de-anonymize data. But GDPR is actually not that strict. You have a lot of options there. And it's always up to the data owner. So if it's non-anonymous data, then usually the data owner is the user, the end user. But if it's company data, then the company is the owner. And the owner can decide what happens with the data. So you as a user, if you go online on Facebook, you're free to share all your private messages with the rest of the world. At least your part of the message. And that's the whole idea. If you own your data, you can do whatever you want with it.
You have said you work for oil and gas industry. What does your firm product?
The company provides the informatics solutions. So actually I work in a division, in energy division. So we provide the software solution for the oil and gas industry for transporting of a pipeline.
Yeah, and I think there are, of course, many industries who rely on IT and on data, such as banking, such as oil and gas, and we can name many industries. Do you think there's a deeper difference between the different attitudes? Probably not, right?
This is the big difference, is your software for production of equipment for oil and gas industry, or for Beförderung auf Deutsch, for extracting of oil and gas on the platforms. These are two different principles of the learning. So if you have a platform which works, you should have a software to beurteilen, to analyze of processes on this platform and predict the defects or the all negative situations, and to to learn to modify the Bestände, the given processes. If you make a software for the product of this oil platform, you should have Forschung, also you should have forecasting, you should have engineers, you should have the product and product firms which product this all that are two.
Let me just stop you, okay, and just answer. It's a very good question. Data acquisition is very important, I think, in any AI or machine learning project.
Exactly.
And this is a good base for actually any AI or machine learning project, as I said. And it is not necessarily just for oil and gas, as we mentioned before. It can be as well for marketing, agriculture,
finance.
AI is advanced technology. We are saying it's like automation on steroids, and it actually tends to be present in everybody's life. So it's not like software connected to this particular domain. Mm-hmm. And this is actually what we are trying to put it on the same level, no matter which discipline it is. Maybe sometimes there are some specialties in some disciplines, if that's what you wanted to ask about. But I believe there is like common sharing experience we would like to present right now that actually are important for any disciplines, because I believe that's where it appears actually in many people's life.
Fits to the let's say the narrative of this conference, because this is not a specific industry conference. It's not an automotive conference, finance conference. It's very generic ML and data consideration which we have here. Time is over now. I'd like to say thank you. Give him a hand, please, for being here.